Microphone in hand. You know what that means? Conceptual video time. As a quick disclaimer, with a lot of these things, with off-grid systems, I do a lot of configuration and a lot of experimentation. I am not an electrician, and so therefore it must be heeded that my advice does not really encompass electrical code installation with an existing subpanel. All I know is that you need to talk to an electrician. With that out of the way, let's get into the video. Off-grid systems come in a variety of shapes, from power banks to three-phase monsters capable of powering multiple homes. All these have a purpose, and it's very important to understand that these sit on a spectrum. Of course, that goes with cost of setup and price as well. Now, if you only need to run a phone, have a little bit of juice to charge up your camera, or that sort of thing, power banks and low power stations work very well. They typically have a small litany of USB output and maybe 12 volt DC output as well, along with maybe around 300 to 400 watts of AC output. These are simply meant to be a small buffer for, say, a power outage or for doing some camping. Some may even include a small MPPT for solar charging, generally enabling 100 to 200 watts to enter its system. Typically, these don't also hold more than around 200 to 250 watt hours. Of course, always with these things, there are many exceptions. However, it's good to note that a lot of these things will not have a lot of oomph. When you look at a power bank, you might want to charge it off of solar in the case of a camping trip or otherwise. And what you can do with that is you can take one of the solar panels, like I have, that I generally use for other systems that work pretty darn well, are 100 watts. They have a USB-C port, which can easily be plugged into the power bank, and if there's enough sun and if the USB PD protocols like each other, then it all works out swimmingly and you have about 20 to 30 watts going into your power bank, which is a nice option for when you don't want to lug around a gigantic setup. DIY systems in these locations are still small and generally encompass small 12 volt systems with a solar panel on top, charge controller, and a small 12 volt battery, anywhere from 100 amp hours or so down to like 30 amp hours. Generally meant for lighting or small remote off-grid locations that need some sort of power. Now, I actually did make my own little 12 volt off-grid system. This small one does pretty well. It's only a 16 amp hour pack and only has about 180-ish watt hours. However, was used in the Motor Rebuilds Montana trip to transfer footage over from my SD cards to my laptop via USB-C and then to a solid state drive. So it not only kept devices up and running, it also kept a small laptop up and running and camera gear plus camera batteries. But say you have larger ambitions, ones of running a PC, perhaps even a high-end one, even a small AC unit for a bit. Welcome to the sweet spot. Welcome to the category of mid-power systems. Generally, these have a capacity of 400 watt hours to 1200 watt hours in the all-in-one power station category and have an output between anywhere from 500 watts to 1800 watts with sometimes up to 2600 watt hours of surge. These also are very likely to have a UPS functionality, so you can stick them between your PC or any other sensitive equipment in the event of an outage, and if that power goes out, it will switch from the wall power you are using directly to the internal inverter, all in around 20 to 30 milliseconds. Absolutely amazing. These will also contain relatively sizable MPPTs, generally in the range from 200 to 400 watt. You may see higher with modular systems as they'll be utilized to charge more batteries than just in the unit itself. However, it's good to know that these things have a voltage range of anywhere between 12-ish volts to 60 volts. Some do have higher voltage MPPTs, but those are generally modular in nature. The hallmark of these is they are able to run larger devices that small power stations and power banks are not able to handle, such as starting refrigerators, starting a small wet wall air conditioner unit, or even a small heater, depending on the situation. These are often 20 to 30-ish pounds, maybe 50, depending on how much you really want to shove in them. However, you need to understand that this is a pretty good mid-ground. In the DIY space of these systems, you will have a lot of systems comprised of 12-volt lithium iron phosphate batteries hooked up into a system, which I covered a bunch of 12-volt setups, I believe 2 or 3 of which in my previous video. Can you beat power stations at their own game? But also to mention, these systems may be expandable, or maybe some more batteries with you if you're going for an extended outing for, say, with a camper or a van. Speaking of vehicle integration, many people think with a vehicle you have to go custom. You don't. What a lot of people do, and in one particular case we're going to talk about, is take a all-in-one power station, plug in your 12-volt lights, 12-volt pump for your water, and everything else in the RV that runs out of outlets straight to a power station, and just use the power station. Power station has built-in MPPTs, has built-in output. You don't have to mess around with a whole lot. A really good example of one is the Brockmobile, a van meant for producing YouTube videos on the go from Brassfax, a YouTuber based around highly practical application of firearms reviews, and even a lot of preparedness talk. This van is of the production van concept that utilizes a power station instead of a full-blown custom off-grid energy bank. This concept is based around the idea of using a van for content creation, film production, or otherwise, utilizing a van and its off-grid system to sustain your camera equipment, laptop, or anything else you use for video editing. In this example, Brass uses it to run the van's 12-volt system, hook into its outlets for easy use. Brassfax's system is actually surprisingly modest. The setup utilizes a Bluetti AC200L with 600 watts of solar panels on top. The Bluetti AC200L has 2 kilowatts of storage and 2400 watts of AC output continuously, with a surge capacity of 3600 watts. The guy could literally put a 120 volt mini split on the back of his van and run it just fine. If you're into the idea of gun accessory reviews, preparedness concepts, and otherwise, go ahead, check out his channel. Feel free to check out his channel for firearms reviews and firearms content, along with a lot of conceptual videos, which were rather interesting. Now, say all of this isn't enough. You want to be able to run your home or van for 1 or 2 days completely off-grid. You have some higher power devices that you want to run more sustainably in the long run, or you just want to back up a home or area of your home for longer. This is the category of Tier 3, high-powered systems. These systems are more often than not modular, have more than 2 kilowatts of storage on board on average, and can feature 120 or 240 volt output. Most of the DIY systems in this category also utilize split-phase inverters. And this is also where many home backup systems stand. For example, a Bluetti AC300. It's not quite heavy lifting inverter, but it will run 3600 watts continuously. The usages of these types of systems range from backing up a home to a large section of your home, running more than just the bare essentials such as a refrigerator, but maybe even running a stove or dryer for a little bit. These also may allow for charging of an EV and input for more than 3 kilowatts of power. On DIY systems, often more than 5 kilowatts, and are meant for backing up more than not just your critical loads of radios, phones, lights. These are meant for backing up a whole lot more and including your AC system in there. The power systems in this category include, but are not limited to, the Bluetti AC300, which is a modular and expandable power station that can run at 120 volt or 240 volt, but I do not believe it features split phase. So you will be either getting 120 volt or 240 volt. And this also features the EcoFlow Delta Pro and Delta Pro Ultras. The Delta Pro Ultra is a more widely expandable version that features 7,200 watts of continuous output, along with quite a bit of solar. The all-in-one and modular power stations in this range start to have a good case for use with a home transfer switch and generator inlet. Most of these startup systems start out with around 3,000 to 5,000 watts of AC output, but can quickly go up from there. DIY systems in this range typically go above 20 to 30 kilowatt hours, and generally with a single all-in-one inverter capable of between 10 to 5,000 watts. And these inverters often come with between 2,000 and 6,000 watts of solar MPPT controllers built in. That'll be between 2 and 4. depending on the model you get. And at this point in the DIY space, you are using 48-volt batteries. No excuse. You are not using a 12-volt battery. At 10 kilowatts with 13 volts at your disposal, that's going to be around 770 amps, which means you're going to need literally 2-inch wide cables. Yes, that does not include insulation, to pass that in a semi-safe manner with a giant aluminum strand. Keep in mind, these systems are not going to run your house with no cares in the world for a week straight. That's up for the next category. Don't worry. We'll get there. But we'll run critical house loads for 1 to 2 days and power up tools out in the field if need be. Now, we get into the twilight zone of off-grid systems. We are now entering Tier 4, microgrid scale. These systems essentially say, screw the power grid. Who needs that? This is where you start to get larger Tesla Powerwall installations and products such as the EP800 and EP900 energy storage systems, which are meant to be all-in-one home solutions instead of having a large portable power station. The name of this category is specifically to help with discerning between the high power category and microgrid scale systems. Often they can blur the line. 2 EcoFlow Delta Pro head units have a combined output of around 14 kilowatts continuous. Pair that with around 5 batteries each, and well, you get roughly in the realm of 50 to 60 kilowatt hours, I think. These systems will also have the capability of pulling in several dozen kilowatts of PV for the express purpose of keeping the large and massive, often massive, connected battery banks charged up. Because without that, the system's going to be rather hard to use in a situation where you need to sustain power for a long period of time. And more generally speaking, these have 20 kilowatts of AC capacity and well over 50 kilowatt hours of storage to be at this scale. On the AC output, things start to get interesting because at this point, you are nearly guaranteed to have split phase output and even 3-phase if you so choose. Often these are used in highly redundant backup and off-grid sustainment for large properties and houses, running a business off-grid, or even powering crypto miners. DIY systems can rapidly expand, and truly some examples of DIY builds in this category are worthy of their own videos, such as High Voltage Homestead, with a ton of water-cooled Bitcoin miners and over a dozen inverters in total, a bunch of them in a 3-phase configuration. Whoa. At this stage, you'll be storing well beyond 20 kilowatt hours, often between 50 and 80 plus kilowatt hours. You have the inverter output to comfortably pass your full house load through it, or even multiple inverters on a battery bank with no grid at all. These are rare but exceedingly expensive and therefore are typically found in niche applications where people have dreams that need to be run with large amounts of power. In summary, what you need is dependent on what you're running and for how long. If you're running some lights, low power and mid power systems would work great in a decent price range. Backing up a high-end PC and a few other devices, Bluetti's Apex 300 has 0 milliseconds of switchover time on its UPS and has plenty of capacity, as well as being expandable. Run your RV or your van, either put in a power station that has the capacity of being modular, or add a DIY battery bank with a simple inverter to get yourself started. Need to back up a home? An EcoFlow Delta Pro Ultra can run nearly your entire home's critical loads with a transfer switch and a generator inlet. That, of course, being if you have an interlock kit as well. Very important, do not forget that. Above all, the primary factors in which direction you should go are related to either the time you're willing to put in to make one or your budget. Either which one will come into play as to which system you're choosing. Often you can get really good deals when putting together a simple battery and an inverter. However, many people do want the integrated all-in-one peace of mind of having a little power station that manages itself, which is just fine, and no one should ever be shamed for that. The home system has been put together for a variety of reasons, many of which being I'm very busy at the moment, and also because its configuration is slowly changing due to the fact of me realizing a lot of the stuff can't fit on the board. It's just going to be too heavy, and it's meant to be lugged around from time to time. Plus, I don't have a battery for it yet. I am getting 2 100 amp hour 12 watt cycle batteries, since it's a 2 kilowatt inverter with a 4 kilowatt surge, meaning there's not going to be a whole ton of amps coming from that, and I have really good wire for it. So that's not going to be too big of a deal. And as always, thanks to those who stuck through. If you like this kind of conceptual content and or putting products to the test, like I'm going to do in a bunch of feature videos, stick around. There's going to be a video on a power bank I've had for a really long time, as well as some other types of power banks, because I've had many over the course of my years, use them for a lot of different things, from anything from powering small flashlights and phones in camping to running camera gear. So I appreciate you guys sticking through the rant that was this video, and have a good day. Bye-bye.